Hi everyone, welcome to a presentation on interviewing, both in-person and virtual, with the Office of Career Services here at the University of Tampa. My name is Jin Kim, I'm a Career Readiness Coach. Today we're going to be talking about interviewing in multiple different ways. We're going to be talking about interviewing before the actual interview, during the actual interview, and of course after the interview. So to start off, we're going to go ahead and target what do you want to do before you even get into the situation of interviewing. So the idea of professionalism is something that we want everyone to realize and know before you even go into a situation like that. So remembering that every aspect of your appearance should be professional. So when we talk about appearance, there's multiple different versions of your appearance. The first one is, of course, being the in-person or the virtual version. So it's being positive, a respectful appearance and behavior for the industry, for the company, for the type of area that you're going into, right? The second area, of course, is the professional, clean social media presence or that appearance. We know that social media is a big thing, technology is a big thing. We want to make sure that anything that you put out there is professional. So social media could be everything from Snapchat. We know ones that are very, very open are like TikTok. Instagram has some different privacy settings, Facebook, Twitter. LinkedIn is a very professional version of a social media, kind of like Facebook, but there's not very many restrictions for it. It's meant to be that professional world. So we want you to understand that any social media presence that you have out there should be professional, right? So watch your usernames, what you're posting. Sometimes we like things that are more personal to stay personal. Make sure you just update those settings on your social media. The third area, of course, is the professional text, phone, and email communication. We know that technology is becoming a bigger thing. Some employers are actually using texting the day of just to catch up with you, make sure that everything's working well. It's a little bit faster than email communication. However, we still realize that a lot of employers are still using phone and email to stay in touch with you, keep it official communication. So watch your email, what it looks like, right? We want it to be professional. If you're a student here at UT, you continue to have your spartans.ut.edu email. We typically recommend that as a professional email just because they know they can get in touch with you. Even with your phone, such things as voicemails, we want you to definitely personalize those, right? So instead of having it just saying, hi, you've reached so-and-so number with area code, we want you to either at least putting your name in there or a professional message saying, hi, this is Jin with the University of Tampa Office of Career Services. Thank you for calling me. Please feel free to leave a message, name, and a phone number, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, right? Something like that is just professional. It makes sure that they're contacting the right individual, that they have the right phone number, and that, of course, you're going to get back to them in a timely manner. Along with that, I know we don't use voicemails as often, but make sure you keep checking those voicemails and making sure that someone can leave you a voicemail. Nothing is worse than taking all that time to set up a personalized voicemail and someone calling it, yet at the end of it saying, sorry, this mailbox has been full, and hanging up on it. So we do want you to realize that there's more than just making a voicemail, but making sure it's available for someone to leave you a voicemail. When we talk about interviewing, there are steps that you should do before an interview, right? We have this little graphic on the top right. It's Dwight Schrute from The Office. Am I ready for this interview? False. The question is this interview ready for me, right? So there's a lot of preparation and research that has to go into before you actually interview. So combining both the in-person as well as the virtual, we're going to separate the two a little bit later on in the next slide. But we want to confirm the details of how long will it be, right? Who will you be interviewing with? Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's you and a supervisor and maybe a colleague. Sometimes there's HR personnel involved. Really determine who will be interviewing you and try and do your research on them as well. Of course, select the interview attire. You have to know your industry, right? Someone who is working in business might be a little bit different than a creative industry like art or dance, right? If we compare a little bit more, something that you might wear into an engineering world of construction is going to be very, very different than an accounting office. So know your industry, know what kind of attire is going to be needed for those industries, and select something that fits. We typically say, you can always think of what you would wear in that position plus a step higher, right? So if you think you would just wear a nice shirt and a tie, something like that, consider wearing a jacket on top of that, just one step up. We also say print copies of your resume and place it in a Padfolio or a notepad. We want you to have these different documents. We're going to talk a little bit about resumes and why they're needed later on. We always want you to monitor your behavior at all times. So as soon as you walk into a building, park your car, or even log onto your computer, we want you to monitor your behavior and be professional, right? So Any interaction is technically part of the interview. So an interview isn't just a question and answering section. It's as soon as you walk through the door, as soon as you log on. We do want you to do the research on the job in the industry. So before you go into the interview, hopefully you know what the company is, what they stand for, how they developed, right? You know what the job description is, what you're basically about to do. You might not know the specifics, but you're gonna know a general idea of what you're being hired for or a candidate for. We want to do a LinkedIn research. We definitely recommend LinkedIn and the Office of Career Services. Why that is you can actually, once again, we talked a little bit about knowing who's going to be interviewing you. That's an easy way to do some research is by connecting with them on LinkedIn. Beyond that, we want you to make sure you network, find professional associations, look up journals, articles, trade publications, of course, the trends of the job market as well. We want you to know about that industry and what others are doing within that industry, right? So whenever you're going into an interview setting, it's a competitive field. We want to make sure that you know more than your next competitor, the next interviewer, so that you have an opportunity to get that position versus them. In the end, we also, of course, once again, we're going back to the resume, we want you to know your resume and examples from your resume to use in interview questions. So that really goes about knowing yourself. Remember, in an interview setting, no one can say something for you. You are in charge of your own answers. So that's a great part about it, but that also is what makes it a little bit scary, right? So when we talk about interviewing, before you go into an interview and knowing yourself, we want you to recognize your experience, skills, qualifications, and characteristics. These are all different things that are already on your resume or should be on your resume. If you need any assistance with that, you can definitely come into Career Services. We're hosting virtual appointments as well as in-person appointments once that is allowed to happen again. But remember that you need to recognize your experiences and what makes you a qualified candidate. Part of it is understanding how your skills and qualifications relate to the job and to communicate that. So general questions can be, what are your experiences? What are your skills? Well, don't answer them just with what your skills are or what your experiences are, but how they relate to the job, how they relate to the position. We want you to apply them. We want you to connect them, right? Any employer can read a resume, right? That's a standard setup of any job application process. But beyond that, how do your skills on the resume relate to the position and your duties going into that position? Determine your short and long-term goals. Many of you have probably heard of different questions of what are your goals from a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You don't have to have it down to an exact science of you're going to be in this location, working in this position with this other. That's not a huge thing that you have to set down right now, but a general idea, right? Some areas we know that students and people and human beings in the natural world want to succeed. You never just want to be a failure, right? Everyone wants to improve. So just like that, companies want to know, what are your goals? What do you expect to be at coming in? Where do you expect to be at a year from now and 5 years from now? A company would also probably want to support you with that, right? Because if you're doing better work, if you're improving yourself, you're hopefully improving the company along with that. And of course, we want you to identify what makes you unique. Once again, interviewing and job searching and job hunting is a competition in reality. You're competing with other candidates that are qualified as well for those different positions. So we want you to show them that you are unique, that you do have the skills for the job and position, but you also fit within that company, and that's what that company research is for. Of course, we want you to realize that posture, nonverbal communication, we want you to know that before going in. So posture, right? Having your back up straight, your neck positioned, your shoulders a little bit relaxed, but still straight up. What that's going to do is it's going to increase the oxygen intake within your body, right? Oxygen is good for you. It makes you relax a little bit, creates less tension and stress. We don't want you to have bad posture, slumping your back and neck, and being slumped over, right? We want you to have that good posture. It shows a little bit of confidence, and it builds up some morale, some blood flowing, right? That's what we're wanting. It also affects the nonverbal communication. Of course, nonverbal communication is anything that you're not saying. It's such thing as eye contact, smiling, right? Smiling is a psychological thing. If you smile at someone just walking down the sidewalk, they naturally smile back at you, right? It's awkward not to smile back at someone at that point. So we want you to always realize going in, start smiling. It's going to help build your confidence a little bit, and it's going to get you ready for that interview. When we talk about the differences between in-person and virtual, I tried to align these really well so you could see this on the screen. In-person nonverbal communication is going to be a little bit different, right? You actually can go up to someone and give them a handshake, right? We want you to practice that handshake if you're going to go ahead and do it in person. Nonverbal communication in person also means looking around the room, right? You can actually physically turn yourself in your chair and your neck and give people that eye contact. It depends how close you are, things like that. In those in-person interviews as well, you can also adjust how your posture is, where the seat is, whether higher or lower, and how they can see you from a table. Eye contact is a little bit different in person versus virtual because, of course, in person, you can actually make eye contact, right? You see them, they see you, that means two eyes are looking at each other. In the virtual world, nonverbal communication and eye contact are a little bit different. Even though someone might be looking at you on your computer screen, do you realize that if you look at them, instead of looking at them, you should actually be looking at your webcam or where your camera is? Why that is that imagine if you're looking at your camera, well, looking at your camera means that you're coming out looking at them on the screen. If you were to look down at them, if they're, for instance, if your webcam was above your screen or above them for the image of them on your screen, you'd actually be looking down at them. So we want you to make sure that you look at them via the webcam instead of looking at them directly in a virtual interview. Along with that, some of the things about nonverbal communication that come with eye contact are the setups of things. For instance, we want your laptop to be about eye level. We want to watch the distance between the laptop and yourself. Sometimes if you're too close to the laptop, you're blowing up and you're on the whole screen. Sometimes we also want you to worry about having it too far away, right? Then you look tiny. Different considerations within nonverbal communication is sometimes it's too dark. They can't even see your face or facial reactions, like whether you're smiling or sad or things like that. We want them to be able to see that. So watch your background, watch the lighting, and watch the nonverbal communication you're providing there as well. Hand motions are going to be a little bit different with nonverbal communication. In person, you might be able to use it and they might be able to see a little bit more. In virtual, if your hands aren't being shown and you're a person who talks with their hands, once again, not too much, find that right balance between things. Adjust your camera so they can see those hand motions, right? That adds to the interview. It adds to the flavor, the personality of who you are, and that is a good thing. Some other differences between in-person and virtual, of course, in-person, some of you might have to worry about parking, traffic, what bus to take, or Uber or taxi, or whether, if you're close enough, you might be able to walk, things like that. So always having to adjust for those different things, as well as, of course, the check-in process, right? Do you go to the front desk of a 30-story building and have to check out one desk, go into an elevator and check out another desk? What happens if you get lost? Things like that. In a virtual interview, however, we want you to be more concerned about some different areas, such as time zones, right? We know that virtual interviews can be done worldwide now. So some of you on the East Coast, you're gonna have to watch Central Time, some Mountain Time, where are people located? So you might wanna confirm that or make sure that you are in the right time zone, the right dates. Other areas to watch for virtual interviews, of course, are technology requirements. Watch webcams, microphones, speakers, and of course your internet connections. I know some of these things are harder to adjust. Some of you have them on laptops. Some of you are probably going to try and use a tablet. Some of you might try and use your phone. We recommend staying away from your phone. If it's your last resort, it is your last resort and you're going to have to make it work. However, do realize that looking down at someone on a small phone, and I know phones have gotten quite larger these days, but looking down at your phone makes them look tinier. It stresses your eyes. You might be squinting at it instead of trying to really see them in a big picture like a laptop. So try and adjust what you can and make it as realistic as possible, right? Even with your internet connection, sometimes it might be talking to your roommate who's streaming something on Netflix or something like that, and having that communication with them that you have an interview to make sure that they give you more bandwidth. But not only that, that they're also a little bit quieter in the background. Once again, it's going to be harder if you have pets or children. Those are other issues that can come into play. So talk with whether it's a partner or roommate, whether or not they can walk your dog, or putting your cat in another room for a while, or talking with your partner about taking the children out for an hour or two while you're interviewing, things like that to remove those distractions in a virtual interview. There are some things that we just can't control like we would in person. We also want to talk to you about what you do in an interview. You know that interviews are naturally more of a conversation, right? So in most things, we want you to be friendly, be polite, and be professional, right? So practice that firm handshake, right? Create that positive introduction, even in a virtual interview. We want that positive introduction. While you can't shake hands, it's still good to go, hello, so-and-so, if you know their names, right? Hopefully you know their names by then. But give them a smile, introduce yourself. Remember that before the interview even starts, right, before they start asking you questions, that is still part of the interview process. So good posture still helps, right? Find that right chair that helps you keep up your back a little bit straighter, having your feet planted on the ground, right? You're not crossing them or tapping your foot, things like that. Of course, don't have any gum in your mouth, right? Think of public speaking, think of good communication. Having gum in your mouth is rude, you're kind of smacking on that, things like that. I always typically say, have a glass of water or a water bottle near you. Sometimes talking a lot gets our mouth a little bit dry. Having water, something to drink, of course, that's appropriate, is always helpful. Don't read off notes from a piece of paper. It's awkward. They know that you're reading from notes. Having a resume means that you're just referencing it in between questions. You're like, oh my gosh, like I can add this a little bit. I forgot about this experience in a similar question. That's what you're using the resumes for. So don't read off the notes from paper. It is okay, however, to write down notes that you have, different questions that are popping up, or something that just made you curious during the interview, right? So if someone asks you a question, you answer the question, and you just have some follow-up thoughts. Write those down on a pad fully or a piece of paper and follow up with them, or even in the Q&A section at the end. We want you to market your brand. This is all about storytelling, right? So we're gonna dig down and break this down a little bit more with the STAR method, but we want you to provide enough detail. We don't want you to sell yourself short or undervalue your contributions. Once again, this is a competition. We need you to highlight who you are in yourself. These little areas about who you are and your experiences, no one can tell them for you. You are in charge of yourself. You get to tell that story. So the STAR method goes into a way to answer these interview questions. While it's mainly designed for behavioral interview questions, they can use for basically almost any question out there. For instance, the STAR method goes into situation, task, action, and result. We do add on the feeling and learn section, which adds a little bit more flavor to it. It adds that we're always continuously moving forward. A lot of people will probably say that you're a lifelong learner, right? You continuously grow. Well, knowing how you felt about different things and how you're feeling, and knowing what you learned from that and improving on that is how you show that you're a lifelong learner. To break it down a little bit more, and you're going to see that there are multiple ways to break the STAR method down, but the big area is going to be the action and the results section. So the situation or task, we say, is typically about 10% of that. You can make it 20% or a little bit more, but it's describing what the situation and task that need to be completed was. What was the goal, right? How did you end up in that situation? It should be a quick, not too long story, right? You're just giving them a little bit of background to understand how you got into that position. The action is the specific steps that you took. What did you actually do, right? Think of the skills, think of the equipment, think of the software that you're using. If you're talking about communication, communication means that you're actually talking with someone. How did you talk with someone? How many times did you talk with them? How many different people? Right? Give them the actual information on what you did, your contributions, and your role. Follow that up with the results. The result should show the outcomes. Did you meet the goals and expectations of the task? Right? Did you meet the objectives? If you didn't, that's okay, but try and frame it positively. Like, what did you learn? What did you feel? What would you change next time? Right? To help you on the action section specifically, right? What did you specifically do? We want you to focus on action verbs, right? These action verbs should be on your job descriptions. They should also be on your resume. These bullet points that you're developing on your resume should start with some sort of action. What did you do in that bullet point? Why does that bullet point exist? Once again, this is where your resume really comes into play here. Starting with an action verb tells you what skill you actually did. For instance, communicated with 20 people in a group setting to accomplish a goal of raising $5,000 in a week, right? That shows that you're really showing communication in a setting of business. Use action verbs on your resume, pull action verbs from the job description, and use that in an interview setting. We do have a lot more action verbs online. You can definitely Google action verbs for resumes and job descriptions on Google. You're going to find a whole bunch of different ones as well. During the interview, common interview questions can be around from tell me about yourself to why do you want to be a whatever that position is. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses are some big questions. Why did you major in blank are questions. Remember, anything that you put on your resume can be questioned in an interview setting, right? We do have more questions on our job search toolbox at ut.edu/career. Feel free to look at those. But remember, the STAR method is really going to help you about this. Tell them about a situation when in the past, what led to your position being now, what are you doing here at the University of Tampa, why did you choose that major, and where are you hoping to gain from this new position, right? Of course, we know that you want a full-time job or an internship to gain experience, but what about the internship or the experience, right? What are those core skills? During the interview, you will be probably asked behavioral interview questions. They always start with, give me an example of, tell me about a time when, or describe a situation in which, right? They're asking you a previous example or previous historical aspect that you lived through, or that you experienced in school or in high school or when you're a child. Why they ask behavioral interview questions is that they kind of help an employer determine that if you took certain steps previously in your history, that most likely you're going to repeat the same steps in the future. If you learned from those, if you felt different things, then you're going to change them to improve on them. Tell those different examples, because that's going to say that you're able to learn, right? You're going to change an experience that wasn't so great and make it a positive one next time that you experience something similar. Right? So those are behavioral interviewing questions. Once again, a lot more of these examples online. Know your resume and give these examples, pull from your resume, pull from those bullet points, and those will really help. Sample behavior interview questions, once again, are at ut.edu in our job search tool. Some different examples, and once again, I know this slide is very, very word heavy, but they start with tell me about time, describe a time when, describe a situation. These are all different things. Some of them are multifaceted, multi-part. Employers have the option of asking you the whole question, right? 2 parts in one. So for example, the second bullet point of tell me about a time when you had to motivate a team, describe the strategies you used with them. Those are certain things where someone would ask you both sections of that question in one, or they might ask you about the first section and they might follow up with that. Always remember to give them more when you can. Think of the STAR method. If you tell them about what you learned and what you felt, that kind of hits the category of what strategies you used with the team, right? So that's where the STAR method and the learning and feeling at the end really helped answer these questions fully. Sample questions of odd questions from Glassdoor are listed, like how lucky are you and why, asked by Airbnb. If you're a pizza delivery man, how would you benefit from scissors? Are you more of a hunter or gatherer? If you were on an island and could only bring 3 things, what would you bring? If you're a box of cereal, what would you be and why? Right? These are very odd questions. They're weird questions. You're like, what in the world do they have to do with me interviewing for this position? Well, these questions aren't asked to trick you, right? They're really asked to uncover who you are, how you think through a problem and how you problem solve, as well as to see how creative you are. We know that some industries, right, some of the creative industries specifically, you have to think outside the box, right? You can't repeat something that's already out there. That's boring in those creative industries. So they really test you on how further are you thinking in advance? Do you have new ideas? Are you willing to state those? Or are you going to be a little bit more conservative? Are you going to follow the rules, right? So there are different areas to consider. Questions you should ask the employer, right? We're going to divide this into what you should ask them and what you should not ask them. Do not ask questions about salary or benefits. That typically comes after you receive an offer or when they start asking questions about it. Do ask questions relative to the job, work environment, culture, qualifications, need, training, promotion. Some of these things you can find online. Some of them are going to be a little bit harder. Once again, it depends upon the position in the company. Determine the next steps and process. So at the end of your interview, hopefully you have some sort of date or time range when they'll get back to you or when you should follow up with them. Collect business cards from those who interviewed you. Once again, if you're in a virtual interview, it's okay to thank everyone in the room, ask for clarifying questions, things like that. Ask people specific questions about their positions and their name and what they do. Along with this, there are more questions about what you should ask them. Also, to address the salary and benefits, we do have salary negotiation topics, and career coaches available to help you out with that when that comes along. To really win that interview, we don't really say that it ends right after the interview, right? So there are things that you actually have to do after the interview to get that gold medal of that position. So a person must first hear a message in your name 6 to 8 times before they can actually remember it. So immediately, within 24 hours, write a thank you email or letter, right? When we say writing a thank you email or letter, make sure that you address each person individually, right? So don't send one email that goes to every single person that you interviewed. Send them a personalized one, right? So if you met a supervisor versus an HR individual who's interviewing you, send them a thank you that's personalized to them and their position. Okay. Also, promptly send in any materials requested, typically transcripts, letters of reference. Sometimes it's also a list of references, right? Who can they contact, a professional reference to vouch for you, saying that you're professional, you're a good candidate, things like that. Some of you might also have writing or art samples depending upon your industry that they want to see. Follow-up to definitely indicate your interest and determine the progress of your application, right? Hopefully you know some sort of date that they're supposed to get back to you by. If not, we typically say the rule of 3, right? Don't bombard them with emails. 2 emails within 1 day is a little bit excessive. Give them some time. They are reviewing candidates. Typically, they will respond in a timely manner as well. Common blunders reported by employers: not dressing appropriately, speaking negatively, appearing disinterested, appearing arrogant, not giving specific answers, and not asking good questions. Once again, I do want to point out that you are in control of the interview. All of these are in your control. If you need any assistance with this, the Office of Career Services is here to help you. We have multiple different things. We have everything from Quincia, which is our artificial intelligence applicant tracking system based resume critiquing system and mock interview platform, all the way to interviewing tip appointments with career coaches, as well as our career ambassadors here at the University of Tampa, all the way to an actual mock interview. So we can actually pretend to give you a mock interview as well. But do realize that these are just quick tips on how to interview both in person and virtually. Follow us on our social media at UTampa Career on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also check your Spartan email, check Handshake. We provide a lot of different types of workshops that go a lot more in depth, but this was just a quick version on interviewing in person and virtual. Thank you for taking the time today. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us at hirut@ut.edu, or just go ahead and give us a call or visit our office in the Southern Tampa. If you do have any questions, let us know. We're happy to help you out. Have a great day.